Welcome to the Josh Hall Web Design Show. Helping you build better websites and create a web design business that gives you freedom and a lifestyle you love.
Hey friends, welcome into episode 77. In this one, we've got a really cool, different type of episode for you in this one because you're going to hear from somebody who essentially doubled his income with a web design side hustle. My guest in this episode is Chris Misterek, and he is the guy behind a website called selfmadewebdesigner.com. He's also the host of the Self-Made Web Designer podcast, which is actually how we originally connected. He reached out to me because both of our podcasts show up on the related podcast listens, no matter what app you listen to or listen to the podcast through. And he reached out, asked if I'd be interested in coming on his show to share some of my knowledge and expertise in web design to help his audience. Had a really good chat with Chris, and then I wanted to offer him the same, so I had him on my podcast. And here he is, because Chris has a really cool story. He is essentially still working full-time for an agency, but is doing self-made web designer and freelance on the side. And you'll hear how he transitioned into web design and how he doubled his income just doing side web design when he worked for a church. So he was working for a church, wanted to make some income. And the really cool thing about this interview is it's pretty wide-ranging, but we do cover all sorts of really important topics on how to get clients, how to raise your rates, how to stay balanced and creative, and also how to get through some tough personal stuff. You'll hear that Chris had to go through some tough times when he was getting his business going, and you'll hear all about that. And I just found it fascinating because it just shows you the power of what you can do with web design. You know, he was working for a church and wanted some bigger income on the side and was able to do that with web design. And then that sparked this whole new career path for him to get into web design. It's also a great lesson and a good practical example of how you can do whatever the heck you want to do in web design. So if you want to just do web design on the side and have it be kind of like a profitable little side thing while you're doing something else, you can. But if you want to make it a big agency, you can. If you want to stay a solopreneur, you can. So I love doing these types of episodes to show you what's possible. And I hope this is really insightful and exciting for you. I would also really encourage you to go check out his podcast, The Self-Made Web Designer. And yours truly was on recently, so you can backtrack and check out my interview with him if you'd like. Without further ado, though, really excited for you to hear this interview with Chris. Now, for those of you who are just getting into web design, one of the trickiest things is that you need to learn to value your time. And you can learn everything you want to for free on Google, but the trade-off is it's going to take a lot of time. And if you value your time and you're serious about learning as quickly as possible so you can hit the ground running, I would love to help you do that. And if you need to know how to build websites fast, join my Divi WordPress beginners course today, because that is my most cost-effective, quickest way to learn how to build websites with WordPress and Divi. You'll learn all that you need to know to get going, because you can overwhelm yourself with everything that you can learn about WordPress and Divi and web design. But the trick to get going and build momentum is just to learn what you need to know to be confident to get going. And that's exactly what my Divi WordPress beginners course will help you do. So you can join that today. I'm really excited to help you in your journey. And hey, let's have some fun. Enjoy hearing from Chris on how he doubled his income with a web design side hustle. Get ready to get pumped. Get ready to get inspired. Let's do it. Chris, welcome onto the podcast, man. Awesome to have you on.
Josh, thanks so much for having me. Honored to be here, man.
Well, the feeling is the same. I was on your podcast recently, and you had reached out because I think I see your podcast under mine, under recent or relative podcast or related podcast, excuse me. So you're on there. So I had seen you before, and when you reached out, I was like, absolutely, I'd love to be on your show. And then I think you have a very fascinating story because which everyone I feel like in web design does. I think we all have a really interesting story, and that's what we're going to talk about in this one, because you essentially took a side hustle of web design, doubled your income, and you're in transition, taking this to a whole other level. So I'm fascinated by this, and I can't wait to talk all about it. Before we dive into it, man, do you want to let my audience know where you are and then what you do?
Yeah. So I am in Gilbert, Arizona, and I'm a UX/web designer, which is just kind of a complicated way of saying I do a little bit of every type of design when it comes to the web that there is to do. So everything from marketing design on websites to branding to a little bit of UX design, some product design. I do front end development. So I'm a Renaissance guy who knows a lot or a little about a lot of things. And
that's not a bad place to be as a web designer.
Yeah, like it's been tough for me because, I've had so many people tell me like, you've got to get specific on what you're doing. And I'm like, I just love it all. Like I like the visual side of things. I like the strategy, like psychology side of the UX department. I like the development side. And so it's just kind of, lent me to learn a lot of different things about a lot of different things that we do in web. So practically, my full-time job is I'm a UX designer at a company called Show It. And we've got a drag and drop website builder that is marketing specifically to photographers and creative entrepreneurs. And then I also have a podcast, which super excited to have had you on, an episode coming soon. Probably by the time this one is out, it'll be available. Called Self-Made Web Designer, and I help other folks who are trying to get into web design learn how to do it. And so that's me, and I've got a full family, 4 little kiddos of all ages and stages in life, and me and my wife are just living it up here in Arizona.
That's awesome, man. Well, I wanted to hit on something you said there, which was people telling you to kind of narrow in your focus, which I do agree with for the most part. And what I mean by that is I've found from your service offerings for clients to definitely narrow that down, because clients will get confused if you do 32 things. So I've found that to be really important. However, the cool thing about web design is if you like video and graphics and code and marketing and content, that's the perfect industry to be able to put all this stuff into play and never get bored. Because I kind of feel that way right now, man. I'm doing, I still work in Divi every day and I still do a lot of web design, but I do podcast, video editing, graphics, marketing, conversion-based content. Like I'm doing all these other things on a daily basis. So life never gets boring. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the line is out there, but I think it's a lot farther than people would kind of understand from at first glance. Like I think you used to have a business card that had drum lessons on with web design and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
like that when I see somebody who's like, okay, I've got a clothing brand and I do media and I do photography and I also do one-on-one life coaching and I'm a certified counselor. It's like, okay, right. Like let's narrow that focus a little bit. But it's really cool to be in an industry that is kind of ever changing and ever growing. From when I started, even the definition of what a web designer is has changed drastically. And so it's fun to kind of keep up with that and figure out, okay, which part of me do I resonate with where things are going and which do I not? And there's a lot of tangent ways to go within web design too. And I know people who have started in web design that are doing more brand or doing more, graphic design, or they're doing more marketing. And so it's a really fun category to just learn as much as you can in.
That's a great point, man. It is so true. And this is one thing I tell all my web design students is you can gravitate towards whatever you enjoy. If you like words and you like content, you can go into a lot of more SEO fields in and around web design. Whereas if words aren't your thing, but you're a visual person and you like graphics, and you can do a lot of different graphic design in with web design and focus on the design aspects. But there's also people who are very analytical. But there's people like me who enjoy conversations and content and stuff like that. So I just love it, man. That's so awesome. And I know it seems like you're really, honing in on what you've done with Self-Made Web Designer to help others, but you're also getting ready to take to the next level with that. So let's talk about that, man. Let's maybe bring us back to, when you started your web design side hustle. What did that look like? What made you want to get into web design in the first place?
Yeah, my story, it starts a little bit sad. So it kind of came from a tragic season in my life where my wife of 10 years came home one day and kind of shockingly said, I'm done with our relationship. And so that was tough relationally, but it was also tough financially because up until that point, I was working for a church. I was working for a nonprofit organization, felt like it was a calling, had done it for 10 plus years. And so nonprofit organizations are typically not known to pay a lot for the positions that they have. And that was the case for me. And it was never the goal of making a lot of money to work for a church. And so when she left, I kind of had to figure out, okay, how am I going to be able to keep this full-time job with the church that I had no desire to leave, but also provide for my family. I had 3 little girls, much younger than they are now. And so I had to figure out a way to be able to sustain our life. And there was a few barriers to that, right? Like I couldn't go and get a physical job somewhere, pick up some shifts at Starbucks because I needed to be with them. I was looking to spend more time with them in a kind of tough season of their own lives than to spend less. So that was a factor of it. And it needed to be something that was super flexible so that I could work around my full-time job. And so on the suggestion of a friend, I started looking into web development. And this was when Code Academy was 100% for free. They only had a handful of courses. They were just getting started. And it was kind of a unique idea of educating people for free. And so I was like, man, this is awesome. So started up the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript courses that they had, and just instantly knew there's something in this that I just absolutely love. So poured myself into trying to learn as much as I could about web development, web design for about 6 months.
What year was this? What year?
This was 2004 or 5-ish. So,
oh, wow. Okay.
Some of the dates are kind of fuzzy. Wait. No. 2014. So yeah.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, yeah, you're definitely in the HTML realm then. Okay. So yeah. 2014-ish.
Yeah. So, gotcha. So did that, took like online course at a local community college near me, and then just kind of went for it. Started telling people I was a web designer. Told my friends and family, hey, if you're looking to build a website, or if you know somebody that is, just let me know. I'll either do it for free or I'll give them a crazy deal because I'm just trying to build a portfolio.
Best place to start.
Yeah. There's a guy named Donald Miller that says, when you're building a bouquet, it's always best to start with the flowers that are closest to you, So rather than trying to both simultaneously figure out how to build websites and design and figure out WordPress or Divi or whatever it is that you're using, as well as marketing yourself and project managing and all that kind of stuff, just keep it as simple as possible and go with people who trust you for some other reason other than the skill that you have and the thing that you're trying to develop, so they trust you because of the integrity that they've heard that you have from other people, or because that they've seen because they have a relationship with you. So I did that. Some friends graciously gave me a shot. I think the first website that I built, I got a $100 gift card to Amazon, and I was excited about that. I was like, great, I get paid to do this, because for 6 months I was just like, hey, let me just try to build things for fun. I'm going to see a website and just try to copy it in code and see if I can make it look at least somewhat close to what I'm seeing on the actual website. So
sure.
Kept going. Lo and behold, I kind of ran out of friends to build websites for. Had probably built a website for most of the folks that I knew that needed one, and probably a lot of people that didn't need one, but were just being super nice to me and giving me a shot. Like my mom's website or my aunt's or whatever, and so had to figure out the next step. Like, where do I go from here? And so a friend suggested I look at a platform called Odesk, which people know it now as Upwork. And so started putting out applications, started applying, and didn't get anything for about 3 months. Like nobody was biting, nobody was interested. They had no desire to contract me to do anything. But 3 months came around and somebody gave me a shot for, like a small little landing page for an incredibly small amount of money. But I knew, like, if I'm going to build this thing, I'm going to have to do something probably for cheaper than I would want to. And so did one landing page for him, got good feedback. He gave me multiple projects, increasing the price a little bit at a time. That feedback lent itself to getting more and more projects. And then within about 18 months, I doubled the income of my full-time job, working about 18 hours a week, just building websites for people. So did that as a part-time gig, as a side hustle for about 4 or 5 years. And then something started stirring in me. And I know you've recently been through kind of a similar change where you just realize like, hey, it's time to relook at what I'm doing. And so I decided to go ahead and flip the script and work for the church in my spare time, completely volunteer, and go into web design in my free time or my full-time position. And so considered doing freelance and was about to do that, but found a company that is close to me, that is, just the same heartbeat that I have for helping people and for keeping your family first and for treating employees well. And it just seemed like a no-brainer. Like, this is right in line with who I am. And they've given me the liberty to pursue other things as well, flexibility in the job that I have. And so was hired on to show it. And through the course of interacting with people on staff there, realized that there were other folks who wanted to become web designers, but were just kind of afraid to take the step.
So you were working there before you launched Self-Made Web Designer?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Gotcha.
It was for about 7 or 8 months. And it was actually a real specific conversation with a guy named Josh, who's on our team. And he
sounds awesome. I would trust him for sure.
Anybody named Josh is typically a cool guy. So we were on a staff retreat, and the company does staff retreat well. So we were in Cabo San Lucas, hanging out in a hot tub at this resort. And I was just asking him about his life, what he wanted to do and where he saw himself in 10 years. So I don't know what that is about me. I'm just always interested in people's long-term goals. And he's like, I really want to build something for myself. Like, I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. And so I was like, hey, you're a computer science major. You know more now than I did when I first got started as a web designer. And so what's holding you back from just going for it, just building a web design business? And he's like, honestly, I'm afraid. I'm not going to know what to do. I'm not going to know how to find clients. I'm going to make mistakes. Somebody's going to sue me. And I'm like, listen, let me walk you through the path that I took to get where I am, because I think it's a lot easier than what you're thinking it is. And so started working with him, and it wasn't like I sat with him and, was some kind of martial arts sensei, just,
or like a full-time mentor.
Right. I just chatted with him when he had questions. There were a few other guys on the team that chatted with him. And within about 3 months, he started charging $120 an hour as a web designer and was crushing it, had more work than he had time for as a college student. And so I, just figured, like, if there's guys like Josh out there, then there are probably other people who just need a little bit of encouragement. And so started Self-Made Web Designer with that in mind, to help folks who need just a little bit of mentorship, a little bit of encouragement, a little bit of insight to get going as web designers. And it's been a year now. It's been a fantastic journey.
Well, that's awesome, man. And it's very parallel to, like you said, kind of what I've done over the past few years with my brand here. Same thing. I had built my web design agency up, and then I was actually involved with a mentorship program here locally for a high school. And I had kids that were mostly involved, or they mostly wanted to do 3D game design. However, I had a couple kids who were super pumped up about what I was up to, and they were like, wait a minute, you don't go to work? Like, you just work from home? I was like, yeah, I just work from home where and when I want. And I have clients, and they're all over, and I can do whatever I want. And they're like, holy crap. It like blew their mind. So those couple of kids who really fired me up to teach them, I thought the same thing. I was like, instead of spending 6 hours a day, with these kids, which was very gratifying, but it was, I got to spend some time with them, and then I never heard from them again. It's like, what if I could do this at scale and help a lot of people and then continue to help them ongoing? So same thing, man. That's what inspired me as well. But what was really cool about kind of what you're talking about is going back to what we talked about in the beginning. You can do whatever the heck you want in web design. Like you took a path where you were a freelancer, but then took a full-time job. But how cool is it to hear that you still have the freedom to do self-made web designer? And I don't know the whole situation with your company. I'm assuming, is it remote? Like, is it something where you can, as long as you get the work done, you don't have to work them out a certain amount of hours, or what does that look like?
Right. Yeah. They're super flexible about what their requirements are. And as long as you're getting your work done, you're being productive. We have milestones that we're trying to accomplish as a team. We have milestones that we're trying to accomplish individually. Every month we make goals for ourselves. And then every month we have a follow-up meeting with our director and the CEO to chat about how did we reach those goals, or what were some things that we fell short in. And so as long as you're being responsible with your work, they're very gracious about what they allow me to do or not to do. Right now, we're 100% remote. But when the COVID lifts and we're all able to go back to our offices, we'll all go back to the offices. And that's more of a personal thing. Like I really love being around people, and don't necessarily enjoy working from home 100% of the time. Like it has its cool factors, like not having to wear pants and not having to wear shoes. But, for certain people, specifically like me, the novelty of it kind of wears off. And so to have a team that I just like being around and just want to spend time with, even when we're not working, is a pretty cool thing. And so even talking to folks to be like, this is not unique to the tech world. Like there's some really cool tech companies out there. Like even if they're not remote, like you probably will find a place that you love the people, you love the mission of the company, and you'll just fit in like a glove. And so it's not a pipe dream just to be able to really love the job that you do and wake up and go to work excited. And that's what you and I have tried to help people figure out on their own.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I'm a big proponent of really wherever somebody wants to go with their journey, there's not a right or wrong path. It really, like if somebody wants to be a solopreneur freelancer, like I did for as long as you can, just as a one-man or one-woman shop, awesome. Do that as long as you can. But as soon as you get to the point where you feel that nudge to scale, then take the next step. And that's really what I'm working on hard right now, is helping everybody, no matter where they are in their journey, whether they're just getting started, to a freelancer, solopreneur, to those who are building maybe just a small team with subcontractors, and then those who are at a high six-figure level who are building a small team and actually growing a legit business. And that's the cool thing about web design. It can work for everybody. And somebody who wants to be a solopreneur shouldn't be pressured to be an agency owner if they don't want to be. That's kind of how I've felt for a long time. So I'm big on telling my students that as well, and everyone listening, do what works for you. And that's what I love about your story, Chris, is you were able to do freelance, you're able to double your income, and that really changed your life course to where you're able to work with this company, but you're also passionate about helping others. I'd love to hear some practicalities about your freelance and how you actually started raising your rates and getting more clients. Quick question before we dive in, though. Did you do that under a certain brand name, or did you do it under your personal name? Do you still have those clients, or what happened when you made that shift? I'm curious about what happened to those clients, when you took a full-time job.
Yeah. Well, so it was a bit of a struggle at the very beginning, trying to figure out like, what was I going to do? Was I going to just say it was my name and be a freelancer, or was I going to turn it into a business? And
everybody's struggle in the beginning.
Yeah.
What do I name it?
And my name is a little weird, so it's Misterek, but it's spelled Misterek. And my full name, if you say it together fast enough, it sounds like Christmas tree. And so, people that love Christmas are always happy when I say that, but most other people just think I'm kidding them. They're like, are you being a jerk right now? Like, is that your name is Christmas tree? So I really struggled with this at the very, very beginning, but landed on going with Misterek Web Design as the name of, my face of whatever I was doing. Gotcha. And did that for a couple of reasons. Number one, I wanted it to be my last name because it is unique. And, I think if you've got something that helps you stand out, why not lean on that? And there's nothing that will help you stand out like your name. And so using that in my advantage and kind of owning it. So there's the pride factor of it as well. So when I talk to people, I would say, this is the name of my company, and I use my last name because I'm proud of my heritage. I'm proud of my family, and I'm going to give you things that I'm proud of. And so I used it almost like a marketing tool in the midst of what I was doing. So
Gotcha.
I don't know if there's a right or wrong way to do when it comes to like naming whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah, I feel pretty passionately that if you plan to scale or if you think one day you're going to make it bigger than yourself, I would definitely go with some sort of company name. I know for me, I chose In Transit Studios, which was actually based off my band's third album. Our album was In Transit, so I was like, well, that sounds like a cool name, and it wasn't taken. But I had debated on like Josh Hall Design or Josh Hall Web, all this kind of stuff. But I wanted to keep it open-ended in case I thought it would scale one day, which I'm glad I did, because now it is a full agency, and Transit Studios is a whole agency. That would be my 2 cents on it, just, thinking long-term. But the beauty about it is you can always change it. And I'll be honest, like over half of my clients never knew my business name. They just knew me as Josh, their web guy. So it really didn't matter.
Right. Yeah, there's something to say if you plan on scaling, or one day if you plan on selling, it's going to be tough to sell something that has your name in it. And my intention was never to get big. My intention was to keep it a side hustle for the rest of my life and just kind of keep doing church work and nonprofit music and all that kind of stuff. But lo and behold, things change.
So yeah, when you started that, like, sounds like you got clients just like I recommend, starting with your personal network, one at a time. You do some freebies, you do some volunteer stuff, you do some stuff for friends and people you know. Obviously, it's not where you want to keep your price points very long, but what made you start to raise your rates? Did you feel like you got more competent at web design? Did you feel like you had kind of, built up a portfolio and you got testimonials? Like, what did the first steps of raising your rates look like? Because if you double your income in 18 months, at some point you can't be doing sites for $100. So what did that look like?
Yeah, 100%. So I don't know that I ever got a ton more confident in what I was doing, and you've probably experienced this and probably have talked to a lot of people who experience this the same way. It's really easy to feel like you don't know what you're doing, no matter how much experience you have in the midst of being a web designer, because it is such a vast sea of things and possibilities. And so, I would never encourage somebody to wait until they feel confident to raise their rates, because more time than not, your feeling of confidence is a lot less than your actual competence. And so, sometimes you just have to close your eyes, raise your rates, and hope for the best. And that's exactly what I did. So my thought was, every time I had a job for a certain amount of money, so let's say I'm doing a website for $500. In the middle of that job, if I get an invite for another project that I know I'm going to have to wait, or I'm going to have to work extra, I'm going to ask for more than what I was currently charging for the website that I was currently doing. And so the worst that can happen is they say no, and I still have a project that I'm making money from. And so it's not a big deal. The best thing that can happen is they say yes, and now I'm making more money than what I'm currently making. And so it just keeps me more motivated to keep going. And so I just kind of did a percentage factor. I said, okay, this time I'm going to charge 30% more. And so 500 went to, $750, went to $1,200. And I just kept doing that until I reached a point where people stopped saying yes, right? So I think that's kind of the supply demand curve, right? You raise your rates until there's more people who are saying no than there are people who are saying yes, and I think it's tough when you raise your rates and you get a no. You're like, oh, I'm too high, and you instantly go back down, and that would be a bad move. You need to flesh it out a little bit. You need to go, okay, what are the reasons why they said no? Am I not communicating my value well enough? Did I maybe, charge the wrong thing to the wrong type of person? Because different types of clients are going to see what you have to offer in a different light, right? Like somebody who just wants a business card website with their logo and a little bit of text on it, like you're going to have a tough time justifying them paying you $10,000 for a website. And so figuring out, okay, what does the ideal client look like for me? And when you're first getting started, that's kind of tough. And it really is like trying to find a light switch in the dark. You're just kind of banging around the walls until something turns on. You're like, oh, that's it, And so my encouragement to everybody that asks me, when should I raise my rates? How much should I charge? Is you've just got to experiment. Like it's more of an art than it is a science. Like you're going to get paint on the floor, you're going to get paint on the wall. But if you don't raise your rates, like you will be stuck and you will hate it. And eventually you'll say, this is not worth it. And so
it's not good for anybody. It's not even good for your clients to stay at a low price point because I echo everything you're saying, man. I've talked about this on the podcast. I have a business course where I go into this in a lot of detail, but I'll just tell everyone what I say in there. And that is raise your rates right now. And just like you talked about, Chris, even if it's not a lot, you don't have to double or triple your rates. Like if you're charging $1,000 for a website on average, yes, you definitely want to get to the 3 to 4 to 5K range. However, you don't have to do it overnight. You can just raise it to $1,500. When I was at $1,500, I experimented with $1,750 and then $1,997. And guess what? Everyone who was buying a website from me between $1,200 and $1,500 was 100% buying $1,900, just under $2,000, because it was in what I like to call the same price bucket. Like there's something in the mind that if it's under $2,000, it feels different. Now, projects that were $2,000 and $3,000 and more, same thing. I was able to up my rates to that on average, but I did have to add more value. So that's the really cool thing is once you get more valuable, once you go through more courses, you get more training, you have more experience, you have more tools in your toolbox and more confidence, that's when you can really start upping your rates. But then even if you're just at a starter level, you can still up them a little bit. And even like I remember the first time I started getting about $250 on average more a project, it was like, holy crap. For me, that was my car payment that month. Just adding an extra $250 to that web design project was my car payment. Like that was freaking sweet. And what's really freaking sweet is when you can charge $2,500 more on a project. And you can absolutely get there. It just does take more value. But that's a great approach, man. I love that you said that because it's what I encourage all my listeners and students with. Just raise it. Even if it's just a little bit, raise it. And then as soon as you get more valuable, you can raise your rates significantly, and then you're going to have the confidence to back that up.
Absolutely. And, there's the theory of it all, just raise your rates. But then there's the practicality of it. Like, dear God, if I raise my rates and nobody says yes, am I going to lose my house this month? There's a real fear factor in the midst of this. And so there's a psychological process that, I always encourage people to take, when it comes to raising your rates. So if you can reduce the risk in your mind before you raise your rates, like you are more likely to keep your rates higher for longer to figure out how to play at that level, right?
Yeah.
And so if you've got a little bit more money in the bank account to where if you don't get a project that month, you're not going to be really struggling. If you've got a great month where you've got a lot of leads in the pipeline that I'm gonna pitch this, and if 10% say yes, I'm still good because I've got 10 people in my pipeline.
Yeah, I remember. I think this was back in 2013. At that point, I think the highest I'd ever charged was just under $2,000. It was when I was at the $1,750 range. And I got a bid for a trucking company, and I was like, I know this company makes hundreds of thousands, probably at least 7 figures a year. Like, I'm sure they can afford more than $2,000. So I charged, I think 45, I think it was maybe right at $4,000, if I remember, for that first project. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to double it. Now I'm kind of negating what I said earlier. You don't have to double your rates, but I did, because I did get to the point where I felt more confident and I knew I was getting better at design and stuff. And I just went for it. I went for $4,000, and guess who else went for it? They did. They went for it as well. So for me, it was like, holy crap. Like I just doubled, this project. Instead of needing to get 2 clients the next few weeks, I just have this one project. And to your point, like it filled my bank account more, and it also just freed me up to do better on that project and to learn more. So again, you don't have to double your rates, but there are certain situations where if you feel like you have a really good client and what you're normally doing is going to be well under what they're expecting, then just go for it. Honestly, even if they say no, that's, who cares? But worst case scenario, all right, they say no. But again, to your point, you can still keep on going. And I'm actually curious, did you feel like there was a price point for your average clients that you started seeing no's way more than yeses? What was that price point?
Yeah, it was much more of an hourly rate for me, because I started, I hit the $4,500 line on websites, and I stayed there for a good long time. And occasionally I would kind of dip my toes into and I'm a big risk taker, so I would go up to 10,000, and so even would try to come back and do like 7,500. And just got a lot of no's on that. And so my hourly rate at the time was right around $75 an hour as well, because Upwork has the option to do hourly pricing as well. And so went up to 85 and wasn't getting a lot of interest. And so it was at that point I started kind of backing up slowly, back to 80 and then back to 75, and was there for quite a few years. Until I started Self-Made Web Designer, actually, and it got to the point where it was kind of the same at the very beginning. I'm doing Self-Made Web Designer. I don't really have a ton of time to do anything else, but if somebody really wants to hire me, and they're willing to pay, I'm willing to have a conversation. So I doubled my hourly price rate to 150.
And you had started working full-time at this point too, right? So you didn't need... You probably didn't need that side income like that. Yeah.
Exactly. And so what happened was I got even busier than I had been before. And people started hiring me without even having conversations. They would just say, here's the project. I'll send you the money. Let's do this. And I'm like, what the heck is happening? And so I think it goes back to, I had a few years where I was raising the level of value that I could offer to people. I was raising the social proof, so people were able to see like, okay, this guy has a lot of projects under his belt. He's made a lot of money on Upwork.
And they don't need to know how many of those projects were friends and family, right? Like, did you feature those projects and testimonials and...
Well, I didn't have any projects on Upwork from friends and family. So,
gotcha.
Because Upwork kind of does a good job of, keeping people from gaming the system where, hey, can you send me $10 and give me a 5-star rating?
Sure. I guess I was thinking on your website. Like, did you have those featured on your website and stuff?
Oh, absolutely. And I've even got a post on my website about how to make a small portfolio look humongous. Like there's some really key things that you can do to make.
Can you send that over, by the way? I'd love to take a look at it.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's some really key ways to make molehills look like mountains. And it's all about the way that you talk about it. Of course, you're never mentioning that it was your aunt, who was giving you, the benefit of the doubt of what you could do. And honestly, probably didn't need a website, right. But having that mindset with portfolio and even every single job and project that you take of making sure that you're tracking its success. And this is such a key for a lot of people, because if you've got a pretty website portfolio, that's one thing. But if you've got case studies where you can say, okay, these folks were making this much a month before I helped them with their website, and then when I was done, it went up to this much, like it has such a bigger impact, those hard, like factual data sets where people can go.
That's a great point. So instead of just this, I'm glad we're hitting on this because it all ties into how you doubled your income in that 1.5 year period with doing a side hustle web design business. And that was just, so, you got those clients that were a lot of personal network and friends and family. And then instead of just saying, here's a new website I built, it's more of a case study, data-driven approach. I imagine you probably followed up with them over the weeks and months after that to see, what it looked like. So that's a great point, man. I would encourage everybody to do that with their portfolios. And I know one thing that I tell a lot of my students, because a lot of my students inevitably are just getting started, and they're like, well, and it's a great question, how do I get clients and how do I get started if I don't have a portfolio? Like, who's going to hire me if I have nothing in my portfolio? And I always tell them, do the personal network thing, build a few, and I would say you don't have to do more than 3. You could have 3 projects, but don't say all of our web design projects, say featured work. That's my little tip. Call it featured work or recent featured projects, because more than likely a lead is not going to look at more than 3 projects, and that's all you need. Now, ideally, yeah, you could build out your portfolio, but at least at the start, do some, just call it featured work. They don't need to know it's Aunt Jane, and they don't need to know the other one was, the church that you helped out with, or your friend's band or something. Like, it's still, Absolutely. It's a great way to kind of mask. It's not false advertising. It's just, hey, this is my work, but they don't need to know. They didn't pay anything.
Right, absolutely. And I would never advocate trying to pull a fast one on people. I was always incredibly honest, probably more so than I needed to be, with most folks that would hire me and say, like, okay, here's what I've done, and here's a little bit of proof of what I'm able to give you. But I'm not super strong in this area. And so I guarantee you I will do a great job for you, but you've got to know, if you ask me how to do something, I'm going to have to take some time and look up what I'm supposed to be doing in this specific area.
Great point. Yeah. And that's one beautiful thing about the Divi community. And that's really what I'm trying to cultivate with what I have going on moving forward, is that, because I did the same thing. If you don't know how to do something, don't oversell yourself. Inevitably, you're going to have to figure some things out in web design, but you don't want to put yourself into a position where you're in way, way over your head.
Absolutely.
So in that point, I would always say, like, if this is something I think I could learn, like, we'll just, I'm going to have to figure out a little bit about this and I'll get back with you. Or I know somebody who can help out with this, or I can find somebody. And that's the beauty about Divi. And I mean, I have a free Facebook group that's great for. However, it's actually why I'm working towards building a membership for my entire kind of my tribe. So when you get into those type of situations, you can refer to my trusted network. Like, if you get outside of your head with SEO research and keyword research and you don't know how to do any of that, I'm going to have people you can refer back to. So there's a lot of different options out there with that idea in mind. It's a great point, man.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that people who are just getting started can make is overselling yourself and overpromising. And I had some great advice at the very beginning from a friend of mine who's built multiple businesses, that told me, is as hard as it is, always undersell yourself. And so if somebody is quoting that the project is going to take them a day and a half, and that that's ridiculous, just be honest with the person that is, working with you on the project, and say, this is going to take me, and whatever you think it's going to take, put some cushion time in there. So if it's going to take you a month, tell them it's going to take 2 to 3 months. And if you
undersell, over deliver, right?
Exactly. If you lose the project because you've been honest, like, you don't want that project anyways. Like, getting a project by the skin of your teeth will always work out negatively for you in the long run, right? Like, as much as it's like, and this is at my core, like, I love sales. I love talking to people. I love, like, having conversations and trying to convince somebody of something. Like, I'm just built that way. But, the thrill of the hunt can get really enticing and really dangerous, where if you're like, well, let's just add something else onto the mix where it makes it where they can't say no. And then all of a sudden you find yourself 3 weeks into it and you're like, why did I say yes to this? Like, what was I thinking? And so having that baseline of integrity, but also being wise and being patient, because if you're quick to the draw, you will burn out, or you will get bad feedback, and people will avoid you like the plague. So be smart about what you're doing.
That's also a lesson in being modest and watching your pride too. I think a lot of people who are very competitive struggle with the feeling of losing out or like failing. And actually academics struggle with that more than anybody. If you go for a project and you don't get it, it's one reason I'm not an academic, and I have my thoughts on college and higher ed, because I feel like so many people are programmed to be afraid of failing, whereas it's going to happen all the time in the real world of freelance web design. So it's okay to fail. It's okay to not get a project, learn from it.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, yeah, like to your point, don't sacrifice what you do. Don't sacrifice who you are just to get a project if it's not a good fit. I understand there are some times where you got a mortgage to pay. You might need to take something on just to cover that month. But at the same time, you want to be very careful not to put yourself in a position where you can't say yes to the really good projects that are perfectly suited for you. So it's a balance, and it's something that I experienced early on. I had to be I learned pretty early on just what you're saying, that here's what I do. I know it's going to expand and change, but I really, like at that time, early on, I did not do e-commerce. I was like, I'm not set up for that. I don't know anything about e-commerce. And I just never felt comfortable. The few people who asked me, I referred them out because I just, it would have been awesome to get like a $10,000 project when my average was $1,500. But if it's a project that I'm way in over my head, and I could completely, 10,000 would be great, but if I, didn't do a good job, that's a bad thing. I'd rather get a bunch of 1,500 projects that were right down my alley. So great point, man. Definitely. I think it is, again, going back to the pride thing, particularly if you are a competitive person, or, whether you're competitive and you just have to get that, lead. It's not like a used car salesman where every person you want to make a sale. In web design, you don't have, like, I remember, I don't mean to derail us, but I remember somebody asked me my conversion rate for leads early on. And first of all, I barely even understood what conversion rate meant because I had no mind for business. This is when I had drum lessons on my business card. But I also was thinking after that, I was like, well, I don't want 100% conversion rate. At least not with the lead, not with every lead coming in, because that's not a business. Like, web design is not a business where you want to land every client or every lead that comes through. Now, what you do want to get a high conversion rate on is once they get past your filters. Like, once you get a qualified lead, that's when you want to have a high conversion rate. But for everyone who fills out your contact form, if your conversion rate's at 40%, that's fine. Like, maybe those are 40% of good clients versus 100% of, a lot of bad clients. So I say that to say, I don't know how you feel about that. And maybe if that factored in in your freelance career when you turn that corner, but yeah, that was my stance on it, man.
Yeah. It's all about not finding the most clients. It's about finding the right clients. And the wrong clients have a tendency to whittle themselves out, but every once in a while, you will get some that find their way into your inbox or into a phone call. And so at that point, you've got to have a real clear mindset of who it is that you serve best and who you like and enjoy working with, because that's the other thing about this is, especially when people are just getting started, they're thinking really short term. They're thinking, let me just make a quick buck because I just got to figure this out. But if you think like, I'm 6 or 7 years into this, and to your question earlier, I still have clients that are with me from when I first started. In fact, one of the first clients that I worked on a site for, like, I just went in and did some things for him. I'm actually signing them up for a maintenance plan based on our conversation.
Yeah, I was going to say, we talked about that last time, didn't we? Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I got to be more like Josh. So I'm going to start talking to people about maintenance plans. So
get that recurrent income going, baby. Heck yeah.
Yeah, man. So, like you have to think about it in that regard. And I think what's funny to me is when I first started, I was just looking for as many people as I could who were doing the same thing as I was. And I found links on forums, I found links on old Facebook groups, but inevitably I would go to their website and it would be a website not found, 404, what the heck, because most of them were out of business. And so if you think of this in longevity terms, you will always come out on top. A lot of times you can't outperform your competition, but you can outlast them. And that's something I say on my podcast every week. If you don't quit, you win. It's not about, like you were saying, it's not about never failing. It's just about that you keep getting back up day in and day out, and you keep going until you figure it out, or until you're the only option left standing. There's something to be said about just having some grit and staying focused and keeping on going.
That's great, man. Wow, what an inspirational little clip that was. I'm gonna have to put that out there as a separate clip because that was great, man. Yeah, it's so true. And I think a lot of people maybe don't anticipate those valleys. Like, there are going to be points, no matter what the business is, no matter what your journey is, there's going to be low points. It's just a life lesson. There's going to be some low points. You have to expect. Now, you don't have to expect to be living on the streets, but in web design, at least, you have to expect there's probably going to be some months where I don't get as many leads. And that's where you want to have better pricing, and you want to have a buffer to where, ideally, just as a business note, as a side, you want to at least have 3 months of income saved up to where if you don't get a client for a couple months, it's okay. So that's the beauty about recurring income too at maintenance plans. But even at that point, just you don't have to expect to be out of work for 3 months, but you do have to expect to have some good seasons and bad seasons. And that's the way it is in web design. Even when you have that recurring income going, there's still peaks and valleys with new projects. But the really cool thing about what we're talking about is in web design, you don't need to get a ton of leads every month. You can just, to your point, play the long game, one client, one step at a time, build as much recurring income streams as you can with hosting and maintenance and some other content services or whatever. And I firmly believe if you get 50 clients, that should be enough to set you up for a very long time with a 6-figure income. And it's 50 sounds like a lot, and it is, but that's what I got to. And I say that because once I got to 30, 40 plus clients and I had my income, my maintenance plan going for recurring income, that's when it all changed for me. That's when I was not worried about not getting a client next month because I've got 30 or 40 clients here to service and I can always resell and upsell things to them. And they already knew me, liked me, and trusted me. And I just want to encourage everybody with that thought because it is something where you're not a salesman that has to sell constantly. You are somebody who is going to start a very long relationship in web design. Like it's not a quick one and done service. Even people who don't sign up for your maintenance plan, you're always going to be in touch with them. They're always going to have questions, and maybe months down the road or a year down the road, but they're always going to come back to you. So yeah, man, I can't recommend that mindset enough. Just to remember that, play the long game. And just remember when you start a web design project and you land a client, they're going to be in your corner for a very long time. And you in turn should be in their corner for a very long time.
Absolutely. And if there's one regret that I have is not focusing on maintenance plans more when I first got started. And, that's such a key and pivotal aspect of having something that is sustainable, or else you get the classic highs and lows, the peaks and the valleys of what it means to be an entrepreneur or a freelancer. And, there's something to be said about having the power to walk away. And when you have something that is a sustainable income, like a maintenance plan, when you're having a conversation with a client or a potential client and they're not budging on how low they are in their project, and you're thinking, I've got 50 folks who are paying me month in and month out, and if this guy is trying to, undercut me, like there's no way I'm going to say yes to them. Like that's a powerful thing, and it helps you. You have to have something in there to grow, or you just have to be really risk savvy. Like you love taking risks and just going for it, and they're okay if you lose everything and don't get paid anything that month.
Well, I have some encouragement for you, Chris, and for anyone who's listening who's been doing web design and hasn't had a maintenance plan or hosting plan. First of all, it's all right. It's not too late. And I'm the prime example of that. I don't have too many regrets in business, but my regret is the exact same. I didn't start my plan until 2016. So I was 6 years into my freelance journey. And people, I had heard about it. I had a mentor who was like, you should do at least some sort of like update plan, even if it's like $39 a month just to update client sites. I remember thinking, who's going to pay me monthly to update their site? Well, a lot of people, because they don't want to update their site and they shouldn't update their site. So what I did was when I set up my plan, I really went all out on it. I came up with a really nice page. I did a video to explain it. I reached out to clients one-on-one. I did not do a bulk email thing. I reached out to them one-on-one, talked about their website, and told them about my maintenance plan. And not to say this with any sense of boasting or vanity, but I launched my maintenance plan and I think we got over 20 clients within a week. So it was like, boom, recurring income like that. So it's very possible to do that. So if you've been at it for a while, that's okay. Remember, your clients are still your clients. Even though they don't hear from you monthly, it's not too late. So that's the beauty about, that kind of services. You can go back and it's likely that even if you worked, let's say over the, for somebody who's been doing, web design for a few years, maybe you landed 20 clients. Well, if you reach out to all of them one by one, do a real personal, organic way about it, explain the value of a maintenance plan service. I have a whole course on how to make a maintenance plan. If anyone wants to, see what's involved with mine, you can do that. And then even if you convert 5 of them, there's 5 people who are paying you monthly and you can build on it from there.
Absolutely.
There's your car payment, or there's, a bunch of bills paid for you. So,
not
awesome. Too late, man. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I want to encourage everybody to go take that course, because I think I'm going to sign up for it too after hearing how successful you've been. So it's fantastic.
I'd love to help. Well, and the other thing about maintenance plans too is if anyone is interested in scaling or eventually selling their business, you have to have recurring income.
Absolutely.
Because for web design, you can't sell a business if it's just you and it's all a project to project basis. It doesn't work out. I sold my agency a few months ago, and I had an episode recently about the entire process. And for me, the biggest selling point of my agency was my maintenance plan, because I had those recurring clients. So yeah, it's huge, man. I mean, but this all leads into being able to double your income and transition into web design, because the cool thing about really being serious about hosting and maintenance is you can double your income a lot faster if you do have at least a foundation of recurring income. So those projects can stack on top of there. But what's even cooler is to hear that you did it without having that from the get-go. Like, you were still able to generate a lot and raise your rates one step at a time in a very, fairly quick period. So, man, Chris, we've covered a lot of really good stuff. We've been kind of all around sales, getting clients, and then raising your rates, maintenance, and stuff that we should all do as freelancers. But it's all super valuable under this umbrella of ways to actually double your income. I'd be curious, do you have any, just like when you were raising your rates and you started doubling your income as a freelancer, I'm just curious, what did that look like personally? Like, did you sit back and be like, holy crap, I'm doing this thing on the side? Like, did you have like a cool revelation with web design that was just like, man, this is like a whole new world? Did you have any moment like that?
Yeah. There was a lot of emotions in the midst of it. There was kind of like this internal conflict that set me on a new path of thinking. I'm like, okay, wow. In 18 hours, I'm getting paid the same amount that my full-time job is paying me, so there's a lot of questions behind that, like, what the heck am I doing with my life, kind of thing, and why haven't I been doing this for longer? But at the same time, it was super freeing, and it gave me a lot of ability to take a lot more risk in my full-time job, and try things that I hadn't tried before, realizing like, okay, if everybody ends up hating me and I somehow get fired, which wouldn't have been the case, but I've got this thing to fall back on. And so it gives you this sense of freedom in your life that, you don't have until you get there. And I'm sure you experienced it as you saw your own rates and your own ability to kind of rise. And I think I remember your story is you kind of had some trouble with one of your kiddos. And so you didn't have to work for a period of a few months because of the web design web design business that you had built. And so
maintenance plan. Yeah.
That's a pretty fantastic thing to know that you've got freedom in the midst of this. And so, it's pretty awesome. And I think coming to that conclusion has been one of the biggest reasons why I've launched Self-Made Web Designers and tried to help other people come to this point as well. And it sounds like it was your hope and intent as well to help people realize, like, you don't have to stay at this level of living and hating your job and like working from week to week and just hoping that you have enough money to pay all of your bills and then have a little bit of fun. It was life-changing for me. And so, coming back from the retreat where we were in Cabo and I was talking to Josh, I was actually reading a book on the airplane by a guy named Ken Coleman, and it's called The Proximity Principle. And it talks about, his whole idea was upping your career and you figuring out, like, okay, think 10 years down the road from now, where do you want to be? Where do you see yourself? And let's make a pathway to progress in that. And so this is 7 months into, a tech job when I've never had a tech job before. And so I started thinking, like, okay, do I want to get better and grow in like the tech career fields? Do I want to become like a manager? Do I want to, be a leader of like a software company? And it just kept coming back to me again and again. No, I want to help people figure out how to do this themselves, because it was so life-changing for me. And so that was the real big turning point that I said, okay, I'm going to take all of my free time and I'm going to go for figuring out, how to help people get to where I am from where I was. And so, this last year, it's been fantastic. Started the podcast, seen some really good feedback from that. Started a course called the Web Designer Starter Kit course. Over 2,000 people have been through it.
Awesome.
In just under a year. And so it's been a fun ride. And my encouragement is always, when somebody's getting started, to say, like, yes, this might be a short-term solution for you, but think long-term, like think 10 years down the road, where do you want to be? Like, what do you want it to look like? And also don't be afraid to pivot, like we were saying, and I just did like a year anniversary episode on the podcast where I talked about a few things that I had learned from interacting with people this last year. And one of the most common things that I found is that people are today where they never thought they would be 5 or 10 years ago, right? Like their life looks nothing like what they thought it would be, but only because they were willing to kind of go with the flow and make a pivot and make a change and not be afraid of, like what you're saying, the failure or not getting it right or having to start over or having egg on your face. And I think people have a really bad relationship with failure. Like most of the time, we're so afraid of it, but failure is your friend. Like failing at something is actually the biggest form of growth potential in your life, more than anything else, more than success. I've seen people who they hit a home run at their first at bat with their business and just did some amazing things, but like slowly but surely they hit trials or they hit sticking points and they were like, why am I not having the success that I had at my first at bat? And so it almost was worse that they knocked it out of the park on their first try, and so realizing that failure is a tool to help you grow, a tool to help you learn from. It sets you up to where you can't lose.
Yeah, I echo that completely, man. Failure and mistakes are great. Just don't do them over. Like don't keep on doing it. Like,
right.
Learn from it immediately. Never do that again. And then you're going to see a lot change in every aspect of your life. And it is really kind of, to recap what you just said there, it's really all about a mindset shift. It's
Absolutely.
a mindset change. I mean, I remember I was a cabinet maker making $11 an hour, and I was like, man, maybe one day I'll make like 15 an hour. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I could eat, like Applebee's twice a week at that. So there's a lot of mindset shift, and it's interesting because that's not something that happens overnight. I think that happens with knowledge, experience, and then life changes too. Like my mindset with money now is completely different than it was previously. Both how I come across with my rates and also how I view money and things that we buy for my family, because I have a wife, 2 daughters, and a golden retriever. Like what I need now is much different than what I needed when I was a single dude, making when my hourly rate was 20 an hour. So right. A lot of it is mindset. And the really cool thing about this idea of mindset, though, is that the faster that you can change your mindset, the better. So yes. This is why you're doing what you're doing. This is why I'm doing what I do. Like we are helping people, I think, more than anything, because there's a bazillion tactics and strategies for getting clients. That's not the most important thing. Like getting clients, I hate to break it to everybody, that's not the biggest thing you should be worrying about right now. Right. If you're early in your career, the biggest thing you should worry about is changing your mindset.
Absolutely.
Changing your mindset with your value, your worth, what your mission is, the long-term stuff, changing your mindset on how you learn, like the importance of your time. There's all these other things that really need to be there to be your foundation before money comes into play. Because even if you, as a complete aside, even if you land a big project for $5,000, let's say, first of all, can you deliver on that? What are you going to do with that money? With your mind, like if your mindset's not right, what are you going to do with that opportunity? So it's right. Why mindset is just so important more than anything. It's not a sexy title. It's, like if I did an episode on changing your mindset, it's not going to get near as many right. views as how to make $100,000 a year.
Right.
But the fact is, it's more important. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that you're kind of, I think it's kind of what you're essentially talking about with your journey. You just learned that, the world is in web design, the world is just open for whatever you want to do. And there's endless possibilities. And right now, more than ever during the coronavirus and the pandemic that we've been through, it's really, I think, open up everybody's eyes that business is going digital more and more. And there's actually a bigger need, more so than ever, for web designers.
Yeah, there's never been a better time to just go for it within web design or tech careers or whatever. Like there's so many offshoots of this as we're talking about. So web design doesn't necessarily has to be the specific thing that you go for.
Yeah.
But I love what Gary Vee says, that no other time in history have you been able to connect with somebody who is in 4 different time zones away and sell them a service or a product. And so there's such a unique time to figure out how to have a side hustle or how to have a freelance career or how to build a business. And so it makes me excited. It makes me excited for people who are kind of pressured into this from, everything that's happened with the coronavirus. And I know that's weird. And I know there's a lot of pain in that. There's probably a lot of people listening who they've struggled with their finances or they've struggled with, not having enough work in the midst of this season. I've got a lot of friends who are in the conference business, like coming from music.
Yeah.
Like audiovisual guys, like videography guys, photographers, like those guys were hit so hard. But to be honest, it's like, I'm excited for you, because like this is something that will help you grow. It was pressure that pulled me or pushed me to do what I am. And I'm so much better off today than I was when my wife left, so long ago. And so realizing like this is the precipice of something for somebody that could be a really cool thing.
That's great, man. I was just going to ask you for kind of a final thought, but I think that was really a great way to kind of sum this talk up, man. Super encouraging, very inspiring. Again, I love hearing about your journey on how you literally doubled your income with just what we talked about, with just doing some work in your personal network, volunteer, very cheap, kind of websites that gave you a portfolio. You started on Upwork. What was it called previously?
Odesk.
Odesk. Okay. So yeah, I didn't realize that's what it was called before Upwork, but that's how you built your freelance career, which, you're able to land a full-time job that gives you the freedom to now help other people. But it's also great to hear that you are still managing clients and you're still in the thick of it with web design, which is obviously going to keep you relevant too with what you're doing with Self-Made Web Designer. So man, that's awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time, for sharing your experience and for really being an open book on, you went through some personal dark times, but to hear how you've come out of that is amazing. And I think it's going to be really inspiring for a lot of people. So thanks for being real about that, man. Where can people check you out at? Do you still have your personal freelance web design business up as well? Or?
Yep. There's a few places. The first place I'd tell people to go is selfmadewebdesigner.com. You'll find the podcast there. You'll find the starter kit course that I was talking about, a whole bunch of blogs and different things, insights and stuff that I've done or learned or just wanted to chat about. My business site is misterekwebdesign.com, which is definitely due for an upgrade. But that's there. If you Google me and add the word Upwork, you'll see my Upwork portfolio and see kind of the base level of prices that I've charged for people and the different projects that I've gotten and what that looks like. So
nice.
Social media, just plain old Chris Misterek everywhere. So Josh, thanks so much for having me on. Really, really appreciate you taking the time to chat and appreciate what you're doing with helping people, man. It's you've got an awesome podcast, some awesome courses. I'm excited to see what happens for you in the future.
Well, likewise, man. Thanks so much for coming on. I'll make sure all those links are in the show notes. And then, I have a feeling this won't be the last time you're on the podcast, man.
Thanks, Josh.
Hey guys and gals, just wanted to pop in with a couple things before you head out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. I would love to hear your feedback, and it will also help other web designers find the show. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode. Just go to joshhall.co, click on podcasts, and search this episode number, and you'll find all the links, descriptions, and resources we talked about. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, and you'll be notified when the next episode is live. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.